except where them hands, where them holes, where them throws, you know what I'm saying?
He was unloading groceries. The next, he was run over and killed in a hit and run. It happened in a grocery store parking lot in Stockton on West Hammer Lane, just east of I-5. As ABC 10's Kurt Rivera reports, the heavy loss is being felt hard across the community.
Family and friends embracing each other, praying, and dropping off flowers in front of the North Stockton karate studio of 45-year-old Rodney Hugh.
He was an incredible martial artist. He understood the movements, the katas, how to generate power.
My son's real shy, and Rodney seemed to pull out he overcame his shyness.
The events that led up to Hugh's tragic and sudden death took place Saturday in front of the Food Source grocery store. It happened around 3:30 in the afternoon when Hugh and his wife were unloading groceries here in the parking lot when they got into some sort of argument with a suspect.
At which point, the suspect drove his vehicle, striking the man, and continued to run him over with the vehicle while leaving the parking lot.
About 2 hours later, police say the suspect came to a crashing halt about a mile away on Kelly Drive. That's when his vehicle slammed into Amy Boggs' white minivan as she was inside her home watching TV. She then raced outside and confronted the suspect.
I was looking at my vehicle, and as I was walking around, the guy that hit my car was walking right past me, and so I grabbed him and I asked him, "Did you hit my car?"
She let him go as she heard lights and sirens. Police arrived, and a short time later, he was arrested. At least one other car was hit. Rodney Hugh was rushed to the hospital where he died. His 44-year-old wife suffered minor injuries.
Yeah, a balance of kind of a warrior and a good person. It was an incredible guy.
That suspect, Dante Wilburn, has been in trouble before. He was arrested in Stockton for assault with a deadly weapon back in March. However, the San Joaquin County Sheriff's Department tells us the district attorney did not file charges in that case.
That was Stockton, California. Now, this article about the situation is on nextshark.com. I want to read to you just how evil and violent these people were that killed this karate instructor, who I believe was a Gojo Ryu practitioner. Okay? So we already know the first part. Dante Wilburn, 34, is accused of running over Rodney Hugh, 45. So that's Dante, that's Rodney Hugh, 45. After an argument in Stockton, California earlier this month. So from the previous video that I've shown here, you see that there was some type of argument when Hugh and his wife, it says here, walked out of the store to their car in the parking lot. Wilburn pulled up in an SUV, exchanged words with Hugh, according to an eyewitness. Shortly after, Wilburn drove off, but only to circle the lot and return next to Hugh's vehicle. Okay? Says what happened next was a violent sight, and they're quoting him. Then they backed up and ran him over again. So they hit him, and then they backed up and ran him over again. And then when they went back to go forward, again, they ran him over again. So they ran over him 2 or 3 times. It's unclear how many people were present at the time of the incident. The suspect, who was in a vehicle, intentionally drove over the victim and then left the parking lot. Police officer Joe Silva told Fox 40. What happened yesterday in the parking lot was just heartbreaking. So there's Mr. Hugh there. And like I said, in the other vehicle, he crashed into someone else's car and was confronted and arrested 4 times. A few hours later. And it says here he's now facing premeditated murder charges, both vehicular manslaughter charges, hit and run property damage, and resisting arrest, according to KCRA. So this was out in Stockton, California during 2020. Okay, it says here, Rodney Hugh Gojo Ryu. It's just a shame that somebody who was doing something like this, all this good in the community, and this is what has to happen. This is definitely the type of situation that when I was a teenager and I was taking formal lessons in high school, if this story had happened back in the day, when I came home, my mother and my grandmother too probably would have been sitting there waiting for me. They either would have showed me the article in the newspaper, or if I got home around like news time, they would, or if I was doing homework, they would interrupt me. They'd me come to the television and have me watch this, and then they'd ask me, now, how do you think you would handle this? Do you think your karate could do something like this? I don't want you to think that your karate could keep you from being ran over by a car or something like that. Now, I do not blame Rodney at all. I do not blame Mr. Hugh at all, okay? People get into arguments, and those of us who know anything about violence and violent people, we know that de-escalation is a must, okay? So I don't know what happened. I know there was some type of altercation. I don't know if it really could have even been prevented, but I do know this, that there are some violent people in the world. There are some people who are so violent, they don't need a martial arts class to protect themselves, and they can be far more deadlier than we are because their minds are far, far more twisted, and they have what I call violence experience. They have violence exposure, okay? That's why I say, if you want to know how to handle situations, in today's world, being a martial artist, you have to understand the psychology of people. Okay, again, I don't know the specifics of this. I don't know if it was possible for him to try to handle that in a way where that man would not be angry and want to come back and run him over again. Okay, I would say this though, just based on my own experiences with people I've dealt with and things that I've managed to avoid. And this is not me saying that I'm better or that I blame. With some folks, man, you just gotta expect the worst. Please try not to argue with anybody in any parking lots, anything over any type of parking thing. If they want that parking space that bad, let them have it. If they start yelling at you, say, hey man, I'm sorry, my bad. You know, a guy ran into me, this was last year. A guy ran into me, right? So he was totally, actually, no, it was early this year. He ran into me, and so he was totally in the wrong. And I apologized to him for my car being in his way. Now, he was speeding. And if I called the cops, he would have totally been, in the wrong. And there was no real damage to my car. It was like a really, truly minute scratch. Truly minute scratch. And the bumper didn't fall off. Like one time I let something like that go, and the bumper ended up coming off the car, and I had to pay to get it fixed. But it's better me having to come out of my pocket to pay for that than being ran over. Okay? Now, that being said, too, I do know of a situation where a guy tried to run over a martial artist, and he rolled out of it. Okay? That's not something I can drill. That's not something I can teach you, really. I can suggest it to you, and I can tell you what happened, but I'm not going to put that on here because if you're in one of my classes and you just ask me about the time when I was in high school and somebody told me that somebody tried to run him over. And the guy knew martial arts. I cannot remember that kid's name. That's a shame because I can see his face. I used to talk to him all the time. You can see his face. I can't remember his name. Don't be offended. I don't remember your name, man. I ought to. I'm sorry. It's been like 30, 40 years, so forgive me. It's been at least 30 years. So, violence experience. We can't get that in a class, and we shouldn't want it. But we have to understand the psychology of these violent type of people. Just know, I can point you in a few directions, okay? Mark McYoung, that's one direction. Thomas Sowell, Thomas Sowell. Look him up on YouTube, and I think it was called Black Rednecks and something something something, where he talks about honor culture versus, I forget the other types of culture, but if you're from an honor culture, you feel like if you are slighted in the least, it is fatal, and you resort to violence if you're in an honor culture by perceived slights, because in that culture or subculture that you're from, any sign of weakness leaves you open to being preyed upon, so that's why you respond that way. So, not that it's correct, but that's just the rules of the way that people who are like that operate. So, you know, it's some super violent people out there. And the martial arts, I mean, are we gonna have to start practicing self-defense against cars now? That was something I actually had thought about doing. Maybe I gotta teach people how to just, so when I was toying with the idea, I just told them to get out of the way of the car. A couple of times, I've had people do forms in parking lots just to make the mental association of practice your self-defense in this situation. This is a situation where you may have to use it. But more importantly, though, try to practice your tenets and avoidance of situations so that nobody wants to come and run you over. You can't plan for every single contingency that's out there. And what's really sad is I think now, the older I get, the more I think that technically the way of the civilian is actually more difficult than the way of a combat trained warrior, even though the way of a combat warrior, in an actual war zone is more lethal. But there's so many moving pieces to being a civilian, where you have your use of force typically needs to be down here, but then somebody can just come and just escalate it at any time, and you don't really have the true authority to respond to it. And the type of response you can give in one jurisdiction may be different than how you can give in another jurisdiction, may be different than how you can give it to another jurisdiction. And then the realities of who you are versus who they are is going to dictate how your response will be judged. Plus, you have people filming everything all the time. Even though people are filming things all the time, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be protected, because there were witnesses that saw Mr. Hugh get run over, and that still did not protect his life. But now, see, if he reached inside of that minivan and snatched that guy up and broke his neck before he got ran over, because he said, I didn't want to let that guy run away, I thought that guy might run over me, so I preemptively struck him, then he'd be the bad guy. So, if there's a takeaway from this, if at all possible, really, honestly, if it's at all possible, just try not to argue with anybody these days if you can help it. Then again, that doesn't mean you let people take advantage of you. So you're going to have to find that. So I remember sometimes when you were asked what some of these moves means, they give you a philosophical answer. And some people may say, this is just to remind you to find balance. I remember that was one explanation that this was giving me instead of a cross-body palm strike that affects the internal organs, because the pain meets in the middle and you're sending electricity to both sides of the body. But now I'm going to use that esoteric interpretation. Try to find a way to balance out the needs of the possible violence that you can encounter in this world. Because this world is going crazy and people are just getting crazier. And another thing before I close, he may have known who that guy was and knew he couldn't beat him in a quote-unquote fair fight, and that could be why he ran him over too. Because he knew he couldn't beat him empty-handed. So he ran him over. It could be that, and it also could be that Dante may have run other people over and gotten away with it in the past. So we don't know. The bottom line is, I really feel for Mr. Hugh, and I feel for his wife, and I feel for his students, because just on the surface now, I don't know him, okay, but from what I see, looked like it was a good dude doing good things, and he had to have a very tragic ending. So thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this and share the original stories about the situation when people like to talk about the martial arts, just so we can remind ourselves that it's stuff that our techniques just can't handle, man. And that's not a slight on the martial arts. There are just limitations on the techniques. Let me say this. I'm going to make another video about this sometime in the future. There are things that the martial arts really can't protect you from. A virus, a government. And I'm not picking on any particular government. If you are trying to fight a government with the martial arts, you can't punch kick your way out of that. A police force, you against the police, the entire force, you're going to lose that one. An army, automatic weapons shot at a distance, your own weaknesses and self-destruction, bad and toxic relationships, illegal drug use, and people who have so much violence experience that there is no way you can beat them at the violence game. So for that last one, the only way to win is just like that old movie War Games. With them, the best way to win that war is to not play it. Now you can learn how to deal with number 9. Just start reading right now and start looking up the types of people that I recommend. Look at my own videos that I have where I talk about violence experience. I said, I'm not a black belt in violence. I know I definitely got a gut Q ranking in that. I might be a blue belt or purple in that. Because I haven't had to make a living in violence. I've just stayed alive by avoiding it. So again, thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this with people like to talk about the martial arts in peace. And rest in peace, Sensei Hugh. And may God be with him, his family, and his students. Peace.
Where them kicks at? Where them hands? Where them holes? Where them throws? You know what I'm saying?